Hello, collectors. This is Theo, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of For Collectors. This is our weekly live stream, and I'm sure you heard the big news that we're going to be getting Hobby Palooza on the channel. So John actually made a video about Hobby Palooza. So if you haven't watched John's video yet with the Hobby Palooza schedule, check it out. But we're going to have a great discussion today about 90s insert cards. Truthfully, I don't, I collected in the 90s, but I didn't know much about 90s inserts because I was so young at the time. All I knew was just about the regular paper issue cards, and I didn't have any friends to tell me about 90s inserts. So this is going to be really fun. We got two guys who know a lot about the space, and hopefully some people will be here in the chat tonight. And I'm going to be asking the chat a few questions along the way. It should be a lot of fun. So let's get to the intro, and then I'll bring my guests in. How's that sound?
Welcome to For Collectors.
All right, so let's bring in our first member of the panel tonight. We got Brian. He's new to the YouTube scene, the High Pop Professor. Brian, welcome, man.
How you doing today, Theo? Glad to be here.
I'm doing great. I think it's so cool that you and your brother are both on YouTube now. Brian's brother's Al from Iconic Baseball, and he's your older brother, correct?
That's right. Yeah. He's he just finished his top 100 iconic and greatest of all time player countdown a couple weeks back, and so that's been really fun for the last two and a half years. I've been just really watching and enjoying his every step of the way, and just seeing how much fun he was having with it. It was funny because right when he started that countdown, I was just starting to get back in the hobby myself, and so I was really taking seriously his idea about like, this is a guide to collecting, and I sort of felt like he was sort of guiding me a little bit on sort of what I wanted to focus on and so what I wanted to consider as I was getting back in. But I still had such a big like nostalgia hit for all the 90s stuff that I kind of blended the two and took some of the iconic players from the 90s and 80s, and kind of one of my first collecting focuses was to sort of, I wanted to get one really nice rookie card and really nice autograph from some of the biggest names of the 80s and 90s, and that was one of my first sort of goals in getting back in.
That is really cool. I do want to know some dirt though. He was your older brother, so let's give us something about him. Like, give us some embarrassing story, or was he a mean older brother? Let's hear something good here, so we can.
It's funny. So I have 3 kids of my own, and so it gets a little hectic around here sometimes. They definitely don't get along all the time, right? And I think a lot of that's pretty typical. I mean, you'll have that with any brothers. But to be fair, there was something rather magical that happened around like middle school. And so, at that time there was right around, I'm trying to think, it was probably like 97, 98, 99, around those years where we really sort of deepened our bond. And it was really amazing because we would go to these pirate games together all the time. I mean, we would save up money and we would we'd shovel, snow on driveways, and we would earn money we could and save it up so we could go to as many pirate games together as we could. And so, that was really cool. We would take the T downtown. We would hit the 7-Eleven, get the meal deal for $2.13. You get, 2 hot dogs, a bag of chips, and a 32-ounce Big Gulp, and that would last you all day. And we go early and get autographs of the players and stay late and then come back and ride the T back, and it was amazing. And so with being able to do that and have an older brother to help you, because if I'm on my own here, I'm only 12, 13 at the time, and I'm can't really be going downtown in the city late at night like all by yourself. That's just not a good idea. But at the same time, I was still over 6 feet tall, and Iconic Al is also he's like 6'5". So we weren't really concerned for our safety or anything, but still being able to do that and hit 20, 30, 35 games in a summer each of those days, and it's just really special. And so I don't know about dirt. There's not much dirt there. Although one time I will give you one thing. One time we just gotten off the tee, and we got off at that time. And of course we would get off at Wood Street, and we'd walk a block and a half to the 6th Street Bridge, which was then renamed, of course, the Roberto Clemente Bridge.
Yep.
Walk across that way, and this was still when Three River Stadium was there, so it was a longer walk. Now, people nowadays are spoiled because they get they just take the tee to the North Shore, and you're right there, and it's like PNC Park is right there.
Yep.
But at the time, we had to get off Wood Street. It was a bit of a walk, a 20-minute walk. And there was one time where he stepped out of the tee station. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling so good." I'm like, "Oh," it's like, "Yeah, I'm really not feeling very good. I'm gonna throw up now." Like, "Oh, okay." And he just like completely lost it on the sidewalk in downtown. I'm just sitting there like, "Oh God, we're gonna have to go home. Like, we can't even go to this game." And so it took a breather, and he was just like, "All right, let's keep on going." I'm like, "Oh." You're just like, "No, I'm good now. Let's go."
That's called the puke and rally. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever, it was a second wind. I don't know what happened, but I thought for sure it's like, oh gosh, we're gonna have to go. He's sick. We can't do this. He's like, no, we're going. We're going to this Pirate game. Like, I'm not missing.
Awesome. Dude, everything you're talking about, because I rode the tee all the time, but a lot of people are probably like, what are they talking about? So that is really cool. Let me give some shout outs to people that are in here already. So we got Orlando in here. We got Vintage Goats in here. Keegan, what's up, Keegan? We got I hate to say it, but Chris from Missouri's here. Chris, I'm starting to grow out my goatee, man. What do you think about it? I'm thinking this will be better for my impersonation. So I don't know if I'm turning into you or I'm just a very good actor. So what do you think about that, Chris? We got Ruben in here. Let's see who else. Mookie Chilson. We got Mark Hoyle. Red Legs Collector, welcome. So we got some great guys already in here. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm waiting to hear what Chris says about my goatee. We got Pastor Craig. What's up, Pastor Craig? So let's bring in Jason. We've had him sitting backstage. Jason, this is what you get for being late, man. We got you sitting backstage.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's been a really busy weekend for me.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw my last chat. My daughter had surgery, so we've been wheelchairing her around for the last couple of days. But I actually went to a Comic-Con today too, so it's
awesome.
Between that and going to a Comic-Con, which I feel guilty about a little bit, but my wife said it was okay, so I went ahead and went.
Hey, it's perfectly fine. My daughter plays soccer too, so hearing you talk about injuries from soccer, I can definitely sympathize. Chris said you can put lipstick on a pig butt, so I guess he's not very happy with my goatee. I'll keep working on it, Chris. Maybe when it gets in a little thicker. So guys, I'm very excited. So two guys talking about 90s inserts, and you two guys that I watch a lot of videos about 90s. What do you guys? So I'd love to hear first from Jason. How long did you really get back into the 90s cards? After maybe being a child and collecting some of them. How when was it that you really got back into them?
Yeah, so it was interesting for me because I lived through the 90s, collected through the 90s, and then I quit, right around the time I got out of college, which would have been around 97, 98, which is kind of like almost like the end of that era too. So, the 2001 era with the Albert Pujols rookie card to me started the new era, that's became the Bowman Chrome rookie card era of collecting. So I was really, during that time period, I was just, vintage for the most part. I came back into it because when I kind of got over collecting modern cards, and burned out on the modern game, I started looking at my old cards and my binders, and I had Griffey's and all those older cards. And I'm like, I'll just go out and get a few Griffey cards and just kind of relive my childhood again. And then that became almost like addiction. Like I just started to really get into the 90s cards again. And then what I found out was there was so many cards out there I've never heard of, never seen. Just things that I grew up through it, but I didn't realize what was out there. And then I just started to really get into it. So that was been around, I would say around 2016, 2017. And then during COVID, I really that became my collecting focus for that time period because it was just something I was just really getting into. And then I branched out into Frank Thomas and, and just got into some other players. But yeah, it was just, something I reacted to because of nostalgia. And it was something I thought I knew about. And then when I got into it, I'm like, oh crap, I don't know anything about this. I need to do a lot of research. This is a big topic I just opened up.
Yeah. Would you compare it to, like, short answer wise, would you compare it to a guy who collects 60s and 70s and going, all right, I'm just going to do pre-war. And then you're like, oh man, like this is more than I thought.
Yeah. And I actually made that connection in one of my videos where I compared pre-war collecting to 90s, because you can go as deep or as shallow as you want, but there's an ocean there to get into.
Yeah. So Brian, you kind of alluded to it at the beginning. How long have you been addicted to really doing research and collecting the 90s cards and checking eBay every day? Like 2 years now or longer than that?
Yeah, probably about 2.5 years. I'd say I've been really back into it, and like, just as with Jason, I mean, I grew up and was collecting all through the 90s, and really it was almost expected. I mean, our whole family, our dad, of course, was a Barry Bonds super collector, and has changed his focus and has been sort of moving out of some of his bigger items and rarer items, and people like Nate, Topps 85401 is really happy to be picking up some of the ones that he's parting with, and anyway, and of course my brother too, Iconic Al.
Yeah.
And so we'd be going to shows all the time. It felt like every month we're going to the show, to see in the back of the Beckett where the shows were going to be this month, and so we would hit them, and so yeah, we were dabbling in all things hobby. There was a time in '93 we even put together the Fleer Flair set. All of us would put our own set together. So we were buying, we're ripping those and getting checklists and trying that out, because we're not really set builders, but hey, we gave it a shot because why not? And it was super fun to do. And so all through the '90s, really collected. Toward the end, I think what really sort of set it off when Al went to college, and he was no longer there to be able to go, to a lot of pirate games with me anymore, and we kind of really just slowed down. And right around 2000 is right where I stopped. And so same thing, right around when Pujols and Ichiro were coming in, that's when I was sort of starting to back off from the hobby aspect of it. And I followed baseball for a few more years after that, but not very much. And there was a 20-year gap in my baseball knowledge that I'm trying to recover and come back and sort of fill in the gaps here. And but yeah, when I got back in, the 90s stuff was always the stuff that was always most nostalgic to me. And I would like study the Beckett, and I would see what the sets were. I'd try to figure out. I was always big about like buying packs. I couldn't really afford like boxes.
Yeah.
But I would get a pack of this and a pack of this and a pack of that. And I would read carefully the pack odds on the back, and I would see what insert sets there were. And I would like figure out, okay, that's a really tough one. And this is the one that's not as rare. And so I was fascinated about the numbers, and go figure, I went on to be a math teacher. So, numbers are always an important part for me, but yeah, getting back into it, it was always just, it came back like a flood, like a tidal wave, like, oh man, all these cards, they're all still there, and I can still like look for them and pick them up and research them, and now I'm just having a blast making videos about this kind of stuff too. It's awesome.
Yeah, let's since you brought up the true pack odds, and you made a great video about true pack odds that I really enjoyed, and I'll start off with asking Jason this. How often do you look at the pack odds whenever you're buying a 90s insert, Jason?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I came right back into it, the first thing I looked at was rarity, in terms of not value, but just in terms of how hard the card was to get, and then how expensive was the product that it came out of, right? So it's sort of like an idea of like how much could be out there. My first indication was that if it was more than one per box, or less than one per box, right? So like if there's 24 packs in a box, if it's 1 in 24, so you get one of these inserts in a box, and there's like 10 in the set. So I'm like, okay, that's like a medium rarity. Then it was like, okay, if it was more than one per box, it's one every 2 boxes, every 3 boxes, that's more rare. So I started to really look at like 1 in 72, so 1 in 144s, 1 in 288s. And you say, okay, well those are more rare. And even if the cards didn't cost more, I would sort them in that way. In fact, I wish I could show you like some of the Griffey cards I have. I would write in the Sharpie on the back of the sleeve the odds. And that's how I sorted them. I'd sort them my 1 and 288, 1 and 144, 1 and 72. And I would sort my cards not by order of year, but by the odds, because I thought that the cards that had those rare, harder to get odds should be worth more eventually. So I was kind of like doing that game back in 2016, 17, 18. And now I realize there's more factors than just rarity to look at. Value. I mean, the card has to look nice. I mean, there's a lot of old rare cards that are kind of ugly, so no one really cares about them as much, I think. But that still was something I was very aware of, as pack odds and just that overall rarity of that card. And then if you add in the fact that there's like 50 cards in a set versus 10, then the card becomes even harder to get because you have so many copies you're trying to chase down. Good example is that's like 97 Finest. The silver embossed, there's 50 of them. So if you want to get the Griffey, you're not just chasing the 1 in 200. It's like 1 in 200 packs, but it's also there's 50 cards in the set. So that makes it even harder to get.
Yeah, I think you bring it. Yeah, go ahead.
What's fascinating about the 97 Finest set that you brought that up? The silver embossed refractor, you compare that to the gold refractor, and technically the gold refractor has a tougher pack odds to be able to pull. I believe that's 1 in 288. And I believe it's 1 in 192 for the silver embossed refractor, if I have my numbers right. However, there are 50 different players available for the silver, but only 25 for the gold, which means the true odds, those two actually flip on which one is actually more tough to pull from a pack odds. So I looked into this. I didn't use that specific example in my video I made, but I could have, and that's one of the more fascinating ones, because literally the one that looks like it's tougher to hit flips with the other one. And so it's one of those completely counterintuitive, like, what the heck is going on here moments, but that's the way the numbers work. I mean, so
yeah, it's like there's a lot of weirdness in the 90s that makes you when you really analyze what's truly rare, what's hard to get versus what people pay for. It's just, you can find so many rare cards that people have just kind of forgotten about or don't realize how rare they are. In the Fractal Matrix set, there is, I believe, the bronze Z cuts are out of, like, theoretically, there's only like I think 100 of them, but they're bronze. People don't think the bronze cards are rare, but the bronze Z cards, because the first 400 are die cut, and there's only 500 total of Z cards made. There's actually more die cuts than there is the base and the bronze. So that's actually a 1 in 100 from a rarity perspective. That's another example where everyone thinks the bronze cards are the easiest ones to get, but the bronze Z cards actually are rarer than the die cuts. So it's just it's backwards to what most people think. But you have to really understand the rarity of those cards and really look at the odds to kind of figure it all out. And it's still confusing. I mean, the 97 Fractal Matrix set's probably one of the most confusing sets ever made.
Wow,
for sure.
I think it's interesting. Like you said, perception on like the gold silver one is like you said, and the one Jason said, like, perception is, oh, gold is hard to find and silver isn't. Like that is really funny. I had a question a little while back here from Chris. We'll try to answer your questions here, Chris. So were they forced to put pack odds on wrappers? I'm assuming they were, because I've never seen them not. But is it like some type of law or something, or is it just what Topps like, we're going to do this because we, that's what we're going to do? So
I'm not aware of any kind of a regulation that would make them have to do that. I just sort of think it's a really good way of tooting their own horn. I think they want to, it's advertising. I mean, they want to show you, hey, here are all the cool things you could get. And by the way, some of them are really, really scarce. So when you do pull one, you should know how special that is of an event that happened, because you beat the odds by this amount.
Yeah, so I remember when they used to pit the number of cases or boxes made, but they would be some stupid high number, like 1 of 20,000 boxes made, or one. Like, okay, you got box number 15,430. Okay.
I think 94 Leaf Limited was one of the first releases that actually serial numbered their boxes. Yeah, and they were very proud of that, and they were like kind of still kind of absurdly high number, but still, it's the, they were at least cognizant. Look, we're just coming down out of the high population wax era, and so they were proud of themselves for trying to keep a rein on it and keep a handle on it and sort of rein it back in. Whereas before 93, it was all printed to the moon. So
And there was a real famous case of gold refractors in hockey, where a collector collected more than the stated pack odds for or print run of a card and sued Topps and was successful in that lawsuit, because there was this idea that even though the cards had a stated print run or an odds, and Topps released how many cases they produced of a set, and they didn't match up, and then that really became kind of a scandal at that time. And from then on, there's been sort of like a little bit of a hobby watchdog on, do the odds match what is actually released in a card? And, I have a few sets where I don't truly believe that the stated print odds match what you can actually find in pack. I believe 95 or 96 Ultra with the gold medallion versions of the cards. There's no way that some of those cards are one in 28,000 or something like or 2,800, like the hitting machines.
Hitting machine gold medallion. Yeah.
There's so many of them. I see so many of them. I'm just like, there just can't be that. Those odds just can't be right for the card that rare. I mean, I've seen those cards so many times. I'm like, I've seen guys have whole sets. I'm just like, there's so many other inserts out there that you don't ever see that have less odds than those to really think those odds are true. So there is also sort of the shenanigans with the odds. I think there is in some years where you just look at the amount of cards printed or in pop reports versus what was on the pack, and you're like, I'm not sure that's true.
Well, I think part of the confusion there too is a set like hitting machines. It was one of those perennial sets. Ultra had hitting machines every year from 94, 95, 96. They had them all the way, and some of them had these crazy die cuts in them too, which are really cool. But the pack odds would change year to year. It was always sort of a tougher hit, but to get one in 94 wasn't that tough, right? And so I think part of that is that certain years they're just way easier to find. It's funny you mentioned the hockey one. This was a card that was also, there was a lawsuit about this as a 96 gold refractor. So these were not serial numbered, but Topps had stated that there was a stated print run of 150 of them. And there was a single collector in, I believe, California who collected like 210 of them single-handedly. And this was in the 90s, like still like dial-up internet. Like there wasn't eBay, really that was out there. And so
AOL chat words.
At some point the gig was up. So it's a sort of a hobby famous card because it was involved in a big lawsuit. And they settled out of court for some undisclosed amount. But there's been some shenanigans with stated print runs and probably likely some of the pack odds as well. I don't know how much of that's provable really. But anecdotally there at times, seems to be something going on there. I mean, and really anyone would say the same about the Pacific. You mentioned how, people don't think that the bronze card is as rare because it's bronze. Well, Pacific plays games with the silver and the golds too. We think of gold as being more rare, but really the silvers when it comes to Pacific is more rare than gold. And so same kind of thing. Same with the Pacific retail reds. They say that there's 100 so many made, but good luck finding them. Yeah. And part of that's because they were retail. And so who knows where they ended up, but
maybe in the ocean.
Who knows, man?
I gave you guys a small homework assignment. I said, show me a card that has crazy high pop counts but isn't very expensive. So did you guys come up with a card by chance? Did you have it handy?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So I have two that I could show here. But this is first one. I have a picture of it on my phone, but I think it's going to turn out pretty well. But this is basically, it's a 97 select, and this is an SGC 9.5, and this is an artist proof. Now, artist proof cards in general, typically we're like one per box. A lot of times artist proofs, you'd see them, 1 in 24 packs, 1 in 36 packs, something like that. And so when I saw this card, I just, went to Baseball Cardpedia and said, hey, let's just out of curiosity, how rare is this? And the fact that this set is divided into blue and red, and where a lot of the star players are blue. And what ended up happening was you check out this and the scarcity of pulling an artist proof. Now there's another parallel called registered gold that looked very similar to this. But the artist proof variety is not a 1 per box insert. It's 1 in 355 packs. So 1 per case. And then it turns out there's 50 of these blue cards in there. So, 1 in 355 packs times the 50 players you could get in the blue artist proof. And this card is like 1 in 17,500 packs or something crazy. So just astronomical true odds to get this card. And I just won this card on auction about 2 weeks ago, and I paid $20 and 50 cents. $20 and 50. That was the winning bid. $20.50.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm just like over the moon with this, because here's like one of the rarest cards in my collection. Really, it's not serial numbered, but from a pack odds perspective, it's crazy. It's insanely rare. But
Wow.
that's the kind of stuff I'm into. And plus the condition scarcity of a 9.5 on top of that. It's like I'm sold.
Insane.
Well, I like
Jason?
that you pulled a Maddox card out, because I have one that it wasn't as cheap as that. I wish it was, but it's a card that's a ghost, but they're so hard to get. I think people just forget about them. Here is the diamond.
The diamond, yes.
The diamond from Zenith. I believe this is 94 or 95. The diamond, and this is an actual card that has a piece of diamond before Flawless, before all those other sets came out with these kind of things. And they're ghost, but I've seen these cards sell for $60, for just base cards, for Hall of Fame players. But it's just, I think I paid $200 for the Maddox, and if you think about it, I've only seen one sold in my whole lifetime. I've seen a Griffey in a few auctions, but it's just, and they go for astronomical amounts. But this is a card that people just have forgot about, and it's just, do people even remember that there was diamond cards made in the 90s? No. It's almost so rare that people just forgot this card even existed. And you look on eBay, you might see one card in the entire set listed on eBay at a time, but they don't go for astronomical amounts of money. The 97 finest embossed refractor Maddox would outsell this card 10 to 1. But the amount of cards you would find of this card, how many times you would see this card ever sell, is probably 1/10 of that. So it's just, shows you like it's not always rarity, but it's, that sometimes a card can be so hard to find, and the print runs are not numbered. No one's really knows how many of those cards were made. To say like, well, is there 10 of them? Is there 50 of them? Is there 100 of them? No one really knows that those print runs, but I do know for a fact, just looking for a Griffey and just how rare they are in the Griffey chat rooms. Everyone's looking for that one card. It's pretty rare, for a majority of the Griffey collectors to need that card in their set. That's a card that is rare, but it's so rare that people forgot about them. And then when they come up for sale, people don't even really react to them because they don't even know really what they are. And then there's a base version of that card that doesn't have the diamond. And a lot of times people think it's just a base card because you can't really tell the diamond. You have to really kind of look, and it's not really that noticeable of a difference because they put a little shiny dot in the base card to kind of resemble what a diamond would look like in the middle there. So it's an interesting card, and it's super low pop, but comparatively, there's about 40 other Maddox cards I could probably name off. Maybe not 40, but like 10 at least. I would outsell that card pretty easily.
Oh, we lost Brian for a second here. We'll bring it back when he comes in. That's a really awesome card. Orlando and Warren both said they love that card. That is really, really cool. It's a legit piece of diamond in the card, correct?
Yeah, it is. And it's like before Flawless kind of made that their trademark. They were doing diamond cards in the 90s. And I think also like I believe Action Pack did one too. Action Pack did their whole gold card, where it was like the card was printed with 24 karat gold on it. So there was been precious metal cards before, and then you had the precious metal cards from Donner's Preferred that came out before the PMGs. They actually had 1 ounce of precious metals in the card. And they made them in 97 and 98, and they are pretty rare to get. I've never pulled one. I've opened up a couple boxes of 97 and 98 preferred. I've never got seen one, so I know those are pretty rare too. And there's no print runs on them, so we don't really know how much they made of them. And there's platinum, gold, and silver. So who knows which is rare? You think platinum would be the rarest, but it's this, you never really know truly what the rarity is in those cards.
We got Brian back. Jason, you've been doing a lot of box breaks on your channels, 90s box breaks, which is awesome. And I guess my question to you though is I see a ton of bricking with the 90s cards, and every time you do a video, I'm like, I don't even know. It like stresses me out that these cards are stuck together and that you have to crack them back and forth. I guess do certain ones of these inserts, because of the bricking, do
Yeah.
they get damaged and like kind of screwed, like if you get one of them, basically?
Yeah, the way I look at it is the more glossy the cards are, the more chance of bricking. So Pinnacle, you think about Stadium Club, those will brick really easily. Fleur Ultra as well. So when you buy these cards, you have to really know that like they'll if they're really glossy on the front, the chances of bricking is much higher. Um, and so I opened a box, you know, of I'm trying to think, Fleur Metal, like the first year of PMGs, I believe 98, Fleur Metal and Metal Universe, and it was bricked crazy. Like it was the most bricked thing I've ever opened. You can go back look at my video, except every insert, because of how they packed them out, wasn't bricked. So like every card was pretty much trash except for the inserts, and that's the one box I got, the Jim Edmonds PMG, and it
Huh.
was fine. It didn't get damaged. It's just, but every card in there was completely wasted and trash except for the insert. So sometimes even in a case where everything is just terrible, you can get bricking. But I have something here. I did a box break that failed, and it was top screenplays. And here's the cards. And what happened was Topps put these kind of protectors on each side of these cards. These are like 3D, almost like sports flicks cards, and I can't get these off. These screen protectors are like permanently welded to the card, and I can scrape it off with like a knife or something, but it won't peel anymore. And I'm because the cards are plastic, I'm thinking about just soaking the card and and dissolving these off. But when you open a whole box of these and you're having to scrape and like spending 20 minutes to get the peel off, that does not make for a very fun box break. So I actually abandoned. That's the only box break I abandoned
Wow,
because I could not get the cards to come out.
that is
Because
that's
I'd
crazy.
have to spend at least 10 or 15 minutes per card to get that and it's on both sides. One just it's on both sides of the card, which is so frustrating.
Wow. That yeah, that has to be a little bit frustrating, because the 90s boxes, I'm sure, aren't cheap.
No,
So
no, they're not.
sounds like
And I had someone
Ruben.
ask me about that, like pricing, and I look at
Yeah.
it like this: the cheapest modern box that you can pull something kind of good in is around $200 to $300 now.
Okay.
Um, I can get most 90s boxes between 1 and 250.
Oh,
So if you look at that price point, it's I can get a lot of boxes for 1 to 250. There's a lot of boxes that are kind of like junk wax era that are still $20 to $50. So there's a lot of that out there. The really premium stuff, the really good stuff that's hard to get, yeah, there's a lot of boxes, $700, $1,000, 93 SP, $2 or $3,000. 93 finest is going to be really expensive. So yeah, there is a huge price gap and price range between the boxes, but I still can get 97 finest for $150 a box and get a chance to pull like an embossed refractor. And I think that's still pretty good price.
yeah. Yeah, that's cheaper than I thought you were going to say, to be honest with you. Brian, we still can't see your video. Can you hear us at least, or no? Just a tip, Brian. Sometimes if I turn off the Wi-Fi on my phone, then my computer Wi-Fi is better. But we'll get you up here whenever you're good. But Jason, let's move on to the next topic.
Mhm.
The next topic was about grading inserts. So what's your thoughts on what grade are you looking for whenever you're either grading I mean, everybody's looking for a 10, but when you're buying graded inserts already, what are you looking for?
Yeah, it's interesting when I came back into the whole 90s thing. Um, I started collecting Griffey, and that's the most cliche thing to do, right? If you're a 90s collector, to come back and collect Griffey, it's like being a basketball collector and collecting Jordan. It's like everyone's doing it and everyone's shooting for the PSA 10. Because I will tell you that in the Griffey chat rooms and a lot of collectors, they don't consider any card to be in their collection unless it's a 10. And I've taken the approach of I just like the cards, and the
Yeah.
rarer the card is, the least I care about the grade. So, like if I have a rare card, like if I had a 97 embossed refractor that was a 5, I'd be perfect. I would be like ecstatic. I wouldn't care. And I know there's a lot of Griffey collectors out there that they don't even recognize the card unless it's a 10. So I think for me, it just depends on the rarity. If it's a really easy to get card, then yeah, I might get it in a 10 just because that keeps some value in the card. But I'm not out there like grading cards just to get 10s. You know, in fact, PSA is so hard right now on some of the 90s cards that if you go into it thinking you're going to grade 10s, um, you're going to have lots of disappointment right now. I think 90s nines are awesome. Like to me, getting a 9 on a 90s card is perfect. And if I get an 8, I'm happy. Anything below an 8, I am a little disappointed. But you have to understand, like they come out of the pack sometimes with issues in the 90s. So more so than even modern cards. And I feel like if you go into it thinking like, hey, you're going to always get 10s, and this is like collecting modern cards, it's just unrealistic. I really only grade cards that are kind of core pieces anyway. So like I have tons of raw cards in my collection. I don't grade every Griffey card that I have. And even some of the rare stuff I have, I keep raw because sometimes I don't feel like grading adds a lot of value for some of those really rare cards. And again, I've had issues with PSA where things have, or even SGC where things have gotten damaged, or like where the holder did some things. I'm just like, for this really rare card, I really need to get it graded. Does it really make sense to even put it in a capsule? So it's hard, like when I have doubles, that's sort of when I kind of do grading more often. If I get doubles of a card that's really rare, like I had two of the cut aboves, and I graded both of them, and they both came back 9s for Griffey. And I traded one or sold one to a dealer friend of mine, and was able to flip that into a bigger card. So in those cases where I have doubles, that makes where a lot of sense where I can sell one of them and keep the higher grade or things like that. But I don't grade everything because to me, it's a lot of investment in money. And sometimes it doesn't really add to me a tremendous amount of value if the card's going to come back as 7 or an 8.
So that's a funny thing you brought up because I was going to bring it up to you also. I've seen Adam from Splendid Sports, and I've seen Brian also. I've seen them grade inserts to try to get 10s and then to downsize to 9s and use the excess funds for other things in the hobby. It sounds like you've done that before too. You feel like that's a good strategy?
I think it is a strategy that is hard to always pull off. To me, because of just how hard it is to get the 10 from PSA now.
Right.
And I think maybe 15 years ago, you could have put a strategy like that together. I'll give you a good example. Like recently, a white hot from 95 Pinnacle, I believe, Griffey just sold for $2,700 in a PSA 10. So you could buy that card raw for $100 to $150. So let's say you bought 5 of them, spent $500, spend another $100 to grade it. So you have $600 to $650 in that card. And all it takes is for one of those 5 cards you send in to get a 10, right? Then you could sell that 10, or sell the other cards if you get a couple 9s and an 8, and pay for it basically by your other cards. And that's a strategy I see a lot of guys do. 27 Card Guy does it, where they grade 10 of the same card, and then they hope to get 1 or 2 10s that'll pay for everything, and then they kind of get a free, they'll get their 10 for free, so to speak. The problem with it right now is that PSA is so stingy on cards grading right now that if you came back all 9s, what are you going to do? Like you just pretty much just either lost money or kind of just broke even. And how often do you want to do that on hard to get cards? I think it's just how expensive is the card. That card I gave you, that white hot Griffey, I give an example because that card's only $100 to $150 raw. So you could theoretically invest in 5 or 6 of those cards to get graded, and then hope one gets a 10, and kind of do that. But that doesn't happen as often as you would like. And I think it's just if you're a really good person that can grade and have a great eye, and you buy all your cards at a show where you can inspect every card instead of on eBay or on ComC where you can't really inspect the card, then you probably have a better chance. But if you're buying on eBay or ComC, good luck, because you're going to get, every third card you get, it's going to have something wrong with it that probably was hard to see on the scan, or and that's just something buying raw on eBay. It's just you're taking your chances.
Yeah, I do find it interesting though, because my logic, like some people in the chat are saying, well, 90s people don't care that much about grading. The cards are some of the cards are so scarce. You're just happy to own the card. And I totally get that as a Clemente collector. If a card only is 100, I'm happy just to have a 1 or an authentic. You know what I mean? So I get that totally. But then my other mind goes to, well, if it's that rare and you get a 10, isn't that the perfect card to keep? Like, it seems like it's like I know it's all based on what the grader thinks. I'm not saying the 9 doesn't look as good as the 10. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying as far as maybe your collection might be worth a ton more money as you go. Brian, can you hear me? Can you hear Brian by chance, Jason, or no?
No, I can't.
Okay. Yeah, Brian, you're still not working on our end. But go ahead. What's your thoughts on that, Jason?
No, I think it's just, again, I get the guys who are building those PSA 10 Griffey collections, because they're all about max value, right? They want to build the best of the best. So it just depends. Like I have a nexus point, where the rarity and the cost kind of collide, to where I only have so much of a budget. So if I only collect 10s, or only want to buy 10s, then that's going to really, lessen the amount of cards I can get. But as far as grading goes, in general, if I only have one copy, whatever it comes back graded, that's the copy I have. I don't try to buy double. So this is kind of the thing with me, is like, I try to not get doubles. In fact, I just got a double on a card, and I had it in a PSA 8, and I bought a PSA 10 because I forgot I had the 8, because I have a poor collecting checklist. So that's an example where now I have a 10, so now I'll probably sell the 8, because I upgraded that sort of by mistake.
Yeah.
But when I have doubles, yes, then I will definitely grade both. Like, I have 2 really rare cards here that I have doubles of. I have this 99 top stars and steels hollow gold. I have 2 of them. So I have this one. I think I have another one floating around here somewhere. But I have 2 of this card. So it's like, yeah, I will get this card. Yeah, here it is. So I have 2 of them. So I'm going to get it graded. And obviously, if one comes back at 10, I'll keep it. If one comes back at 9, I'll probably sell it.
Okay.
But it's super rare card. You don't see that often. And there's maybe 1 or 2 on eBay right now. But I've seen this card sell in the last, 2 to 3 years, maybe like 5 total sales of this card. So it just, and that's a really tough card to get from a set that didn't have much print run. So that's an example of a really rare card to find that I have 2 of, and I have 2 of these cards too. The 97 new Pinnacle Artist Proof.
And let me
the
give
green,
you solo.
That card, I have 2 of these. So I'm going to get this one graded, and I have one that already came back a PSA 9. And so if I get this in a PSA 10, I'll keep this now. But these new Pinnacle greens are really tough. And I feel like they're one of those artist proof cards that Brian was mentioning that you don't see very often. But now that I have 2 of them, I'm definitely going to, if I get a 10, I will definitely sell the 9, and that'll definitely, be an upgrade, and I'll keep that 10. But in general, like, I don't like getting doubles, because I'm not in it for the GPA, honestly. And I'm just really here to try to build a cool collection. Hey, welcome back, Brian.
I'm back.
Hey.
It's all good, man. Jason, real quick, because you're the Griffey guy in here. Would you say, short answer, would you say Griffey's your top 90s collect, like what you collect the most out of any individual player? Would it be Griffey?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I personally feel, from being an outsider, I personally feel Griffey is the mantle of the 90s cards, like mantle, obviously, of the 50s and 60s. Would you agree that there's the Griffey price, and then the next guy down is like crazy far, or no?
Well, I collect both Griffey and Frank Thomas, and I'll tell you, like in general, it's about 10x.
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 That's not even Mantle. The Mantle's like maybe 4x. I don't think he's 10x. That's insane.
I can buy the same Griffey card, $1,000. Frank Thomas, $100, $150. Depends on the card. When you get these really super rare cards, let's talk about like the essential credentials, the rubies, the finest embossed refractors. You get a lot more people who are putting those sets together that come into that auction. People who are collecting those cards come into those auctions. But let's take like a normal, just cool looking Griffey card or a cool looking set from the 90s. The Griffey card will sell for $100. The Frank Thomas, $10 or $15, and that's a normal delta between those two guys.
Yeah. I think my reaction is I thought you said it's Griffey and then the next guy down is 10, but you were saying Thomas is 10. So that does make more sense to me. A lot of people in the chat are saying it's Griffey, Jeter, and then a huge gap maybe to Bonds or somebody else.
No, Jeter is definitely there, but I've seen Jeter just do weird things, like where I'll have a Jeter card because I buy Jeters as well, for certain sets, and I'm like, wow, this card sold really cheap compared to the Griffey. Then sometimes the Jeter will just like in the established set will just like sell for the same price as Griffey, and you're like, what? Why? Like why did this Griffey and Jeter sell for the same price, but then in another set the Jeter is like 1/3 the price of the Griffey? It's just interesting that he doesn't follow the same pattern. Frank Thomas and Griffey follow a really similar pattern in terms of pricing. Jeter is just a little bit of its own kind of thing. I think it's a little bit of a different market because he was so far more into the modern side of it. He has cards all the way up in the high teens. So he's got a different runway for cards than Griffey and Frank Thomas do.
So Brian, why don't you chime in as far as 90s inserts? You got, if you agree, it's Griffey, and then it's Jeter, and then maybe Bonds. Where does, I know Maddox is your biggest one. Like where does Maddox fall on that maybe list of desirable?
Maddox is right there with Frank Thomas. I'd say that's about right. I can a card like this. So we're talking about the White Hot, right? So here's a Maddox White Hot 95 Pinnacle. And I saw that the Griffey did sell for that $2,700 a few weeks ago. I was watching that very closely. I love this set. It's one of my favorite sets. And the great part about this, for at least for Maddox, I can pick up a card, an ungraded copy of it for probably about $20 or so. And so here's an ungraded one. This one's in a BGS 9, and for me that's about perfect. I think that silly personally. I think paying the 10 tax is a little silly in my estimation. Most of the time, I can't tell the difference between a PSA 9 and a 10 anyway, and I don't make a habit of looking at my cards and enjoying them through a loop. So I'm gonna let someone else pay that 10 premium and be very happy with my 8s and 9s. So that's kind of my thinking about it. And in some sets that are particularly condition sensitive, I will go down to 7s. That's fine. Or even, it depends. It depends. Here's a card I got. This is I did a video about the Topps Chrome base refractors, right? And so I stopped at 2,000 for my video. In reality, I'm trying to get all of his pictures as a Brave. And so here's a 2001 Topps Chrome retro refractor. And the thing about the retro refractors is that the card stock on the front, of course, is the beautiful, glorious chromium finish you'd expect. But the back of these has this sort of dingier 80s style cardstock, cardboard. And for whatever reason, the edges tended to get really chipped up, these dark borders on the edge. And so, there's one right now that looks really great that's on eBay. That's a PSA 6. It's for sale. This is the PSA assigned 7. And I'm fine with it. It's a beautiful looking presenting card. And I don't have any problem with it. So
I have a Griffey retrofractor and 2001. And the thing I love about it is twofold. One is I actually got mine in, I believe, in a 9, but since he's a red, I didn't have to pay the Mariners tax. So with Griffey,
I was gonna ask about that because I see very few Reds Griffies out there. So I was going to ask, is there a Mariners tax? So that's funny.
Yeah,
There's
there
a
is.
big,
I mean,
big drop off in price after the 2000, man,
it's
for Griffey stuff.
massive, and
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the next thing. I mean, I did a video about the 2000s, right? Because to me, like, there's a lot of great sets in the 2000s that get lost because of this whole like 90s bias a little bit. And the 90s bias is really built around the fact that Griffey changed uniforms around 2000. Even though there are 2000 cards with Griffey as a Mariner, the Allegiance Refractor is a good example of that. He's a Mariner in that card, and it's a great card. It's a great refractor of Griffey. There's 2000 cards. There's also a majority of the 2000 cards are him as a red. But you get that's almost like the change in the tide. But there are tons of great looking. I think the '05 Topps Chrome sets and the finest sets look amazing. There's some great refractor cards in those sets that look great. And people just have really put a bias out there. And I think the smart money for people today, if you wanted to go a little forward out and start buying those 2000 and 2005, 2006 refractors, I think there's a lot of value out there because Thomas is still a White Sox for a lot of those cards. Griffey, he's a red, okay, but there's still some great color matches. I mean, Bowman Chrome Reds look amazing with the Griffey in a red uniform. There's a lot of great things out there. So the 90s stuff gets a lot of play, but I think the 2000s cards that are still amazing looking cards still really cheap comparatively. So yeah, I call it you got the Griffey PSA 10 tax, you also got the Griffey Mariner tax. And if you combine those two comparatively to a non PSA 10 2000s red Griffey card, you're going to be paying pennies on the dollar compared to what that card, a similar type card, would have been in a 2000 or a 90s card, Griffey.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give a chat update real quick. So, hey, everybody can have their own opinion. I love it. Jeff's card journey feels the pricing goes Griffey, Thomas, Bonds, Jeter. He said that he feels Thomas is red hot right now as far as he's looking for some Thomas cards right now. And Vintage Goats actually kind of agreed with what you guys said. Griffey, Jeter, Bonds, Thomas, and then he has Maddox as number 5. I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised Mark McGwire isn't cracking the top 5. I guess I don't see a lot of Mark McGwire inserts being shown though, so he might just be popular with fans and not as popular with collectors. You guys see very much Mark McGwire love out there in the insert area?
Not particularly. I mean, he's sort of a similar tier with your Tony Gwynn, and Maddox. They're kind of they're above a Jeff Bagwell and a Mike Piazza, but only nominally.
What I see happening in players like McGwire and Gwynn is there's some super collectors out there that hold all the big cards. And then they'll hold them for ransom on eBay or other places, and you'll see these astronomical asking prices for their cards. But in reality, when they sell in auction format, they sell for a fraction of what those guys ask for. So you have to take those cards and those prices with a grain of salt. I think McGwire was tremendously hurt by the scandal, and I think Tony Gwynn is one of those guys, just like Kirby Puckett. They were so good and people forgot about him. I view like Gwynn as like kind of the Maddox of hitters. Like he was an artist more than he was a hitter. He could do things, and like his walk to strikeout ratio is insanely low. It's just he's got some stats out there that make you go like, wow, this guy was a unicorn in baseball. So I think if someone told me that Gwynn cards were going up in value because people just found out that Gwynn was a really cool player, I think that would be true. But people forget, and I think we always forget about this, that Nolan Ryan in the 90s is massive. Okay, like the 93 finest refractor, the most expensive 93 finest refractor is still Nolan Ryan, not Ken Griffey Jr. So there's a lot of collectors out there that massively collect Nolan Ryan in the 90s. His stuff now, it's not every card, but there are certain cards out there for Nolan Ryan that are massive. So you can't really forget him in that time period. But the 90s have so many good players. I mean, George Brett, George Brett at the end of he was into the career of the 90s. But there's a lot of collectors out there that collect George Brett, and he's a guy that has a lot of followers. So that's what makes the 90s so cool. You have kind of these end of career guys, the 90s that had 93 refractors, some autographs. Then you had, guys who just began in the 90s, like Griffey. in Thomas, right? So it
Yeah.
makes it a really cool era because you have a lot of end of careers, and then you have a lot of beginning of careers, and then you kind of end with Jeter, who kind of goes off into the 2000s, and all that happened in that 90s era where you have all these amazing inserts and all these crazy looking designs. It did make it a really fun, era to collect because you could do anything you want in there. But Nolan Ryan is pretty expensive for some of his cards.
That does make a lot of sense. Keegan had a question. I don't want to ignore it. I think it's an interesting question. Do you guys ever send out 90s refractors for TTM?
I would not, because I know how those cards autograph. They don't autograph well. They smudge so easily.
That's what I was going to say.
What I would always send through TTM, I did TTMs as a kid. I would always find a card that was non-glossy, like a top space card or something that the ink would absorb into, so that meant less of a chance of smearing. Because I've sent 93 ultras out. I've sent other cards that had high gloss, and when I got them back, they were always smeared or looked really ugly. So I kind of learned my lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting having gotten a lot of autographs in person at Pirates games. I don't do a lot of I haven't really dipped my toe into the TTM waters. I'm considering it though, because one of my PCs is autographed Diamond Kings cards, and so there are a couple players that I know that are very good about signing, like Mike Mussina, that I would absolutely consider sending something, to have them get signed. And I absolutely have a couple of what I would call not pack pulled autographs, but aftermarket autographs
Yeah.
that are slabbed up and authenticated by, and so I don't know if I would feel like at a certain point, and this is kind of another one. It's so if a card is of a certain scarcity amount, it's sort of, I feel weird about autographing it because it kind of feels like you're removing one from the population that can be collected. I don't know. I'm not saying you're ruining it. I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely no longer
I
what it
would.
was. If you're
I
looking
would.
at a 93 finest refractor, for example, and there's a supposed 241 of those out there, and if you get one signed, okay, well now there's only 240 that are unsigned. I
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity for some really cool looking cards to get signed, like those Diamond Kings. I have one here. I know you're a Griffey guy, and so I'll let you think about this. But I picked this one up, and this is a peak 94 SP Hollow View Blue. How's this for a color match? Griffey.
Oh wow.
And the Hollow View Blue. There's a hologram on the bottom that kind of looks like a spot designed to
Or an
hold
auto,
an
yeah.
autograph, and
Oh,
it's
wow, great.
just
That looks
fantastic.
really good.
I know this card looks like it was meant for that right there.
Get
And
the die cut with the red auto, and you'll have the
well,
perfect match.
yeah, I understand, but the color match though, the blue matches the Mariners,
Yeah, no, I
and
love it.
the red was significantly rarer too.
Yeah.
So this one just works really well, and so for one of the I don't know. Griffey has such a beautiful autograph. He could sign anything and it would look amazing. But
Yeah.
that card in particular is just one of those, like, it takes your breath away as a 90s guy who just likes, SP cards and Upper Deck, and you see that. I had to go after that when I saw that on eBay.
That's beautiful. And I don't mind cards like that. I really have a problem with though when people take a card like and I've seen this. I think there's a Frank Thomas out there that exists, like an established, something that's super rare, hard to get and have it autographed. Because they usually look ugly. And you're just taking something that was beautiful to begin with, one of the most beautiful inserts ever made, and slapping an ugly autograph across it that wasn't designed to be there. And you just ruined a card that's probably one of the nicest looking cards ever made. There's a dealer out there I ran into the National that does this. He buys rare Griffey cards, and generally he does it with game used, but he does it with other inserts and has him do an aftermarket auto. Then he charges 3 to 4 times what he paid for both the auto and the card.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's a great, business scheme, but you're ruining, he has the original game jersey from Griffey, 96, the first year for game jerseys. He gets
97.
some autographed.
Yeah.
And he gets some autographed. And it's like, they don't need to be autographed. I understand what you're doing. You're creating value for yourself. But to me, you're just taking a card that was beautiful to begin with, the first ever game jersey card, and put an autograph on it just because you want people. And a lot of people don't know, because again, if you're new to the hobby, that card wasn't originally autographed. And then when people take the manual auto and have Griffey sign it
Yeah.
aftermarket from
Yeah.
'94,
Oh,
you're
I didn't know
really
about that.
crossing the line to me of trying to fake collectors out, because that wasn't
Yeah.
pack pulled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting because especially in that particular case, because I guess they they each signed 1,000 alone and 1,000 with a joint one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And but even if you pull one that only has the mantle or only has the Griffey, it still has the upper deck sticker on the back. It still has that UDA sticker.
Right.
So that provides a really unique opportunity for forgers if you're really, really good. Or I hadn't considered taking it to a signing and having Griffey fill in the missing one, taking the mantle one. I hadn't even considered that. But
There's many out there, and if you
that's a
just
murky territory.
if you go look at the autos of that dual auto and see the differences between the autos, I mean, sometimes they even use different color pens where they're not even trying to be the same looking auto. But
Wow.
Griffey's autos change over time from
It
what it
has.
was that rookie year, the close to his rookie year. So it just kind of ruins that card, because a Mano auto by itself should be a card you celebrate, not slap a Griffey auto sometimes over the Mano auto, because it's hard to that's a small card. It's just to me, it's like you're taking something that was historic, and you've just done that for money purposes. Not You're not doing it because you're nostalgic. Like you wanted this dual auto card for yourself. You're going to slap a $15,000 price tag and sell it on eBay.
What do you guys get more? I'm guessing I know the answer, but let me just ask it. Do you guys get more excited for rare pack pulled autos, or do you get more excited for 90s inserts?
Ooh.
And the pack pulled autos, I'm talking about the 90s ones that you're talking about, the first ones.
Well, they're rare. That's
Yeah,
the one thing I'd say
100%.
if you pull a pack pull 90s Griffey auto on card, like that was a one in case, that's a case at minimum, and they're rare. So I'd say I would be super excited to pull a 90s Griffey auto. I think certain sets, like if I said there's two cards I would probably be more excited about pulling outside of the PMG type card. It'd be the 97 embossed refractor gold and the established out of Mystique. Those two cards I would probably be more excited about pulling those than I would an auto. But in generally most cases, like if I pulled an auto out of Legends or out of Flair Retro, I would be super stoked.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely room for both. I love them both. I'm not sure if I have a true preference. I definitely go after both for my guy Maddox, and so I'm happy to have Donna's signature Millennium Marks. I'm happy to have SP Chirography.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy. I am targeting the 96 Leaf signature, which is kind of cool because even for the Millennium Marks, he and many of the other stars only signed like 400 of those. And so even though you would think that they have 1,000 that are numbered the 100 to 1,100 because the first 100 of a century, they're more limited than they seem. And same with the 96 Leaf signature, he only signed 500 of those, and so even if they're not serial numbered, there is a more limited run of them available, which makes them a little bit more special, I think, than a lot of other ones. I have a card that's actually at PSA right now. That's a Tony Gwynn 92 Ultra pack pulled autograph. He had a 92 Ultra commemorative set that I'm looking forward to getting that dual graded. I don't think it's an auto 10, but I think it definitely has a shot at a 9.9, which I would be really, really happy if that came to fruition.
Yeah, that card, Tony put a pretty big auto on it from what I remember seeing what those look like. He signed over almost the entire card.
And what's interesting is that there were like 12 cards in that set that all had different pictures, but some of the pictures were very dark and you could barely even see the auto. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to acquire one that was a nice light, it was very visible and would show up nice and bold. So
well, I want to tell you though, Jason, Chris is a big fan of you now that you talked about George Brett, but our rankings are a bunch of people left though when you started talking about George Brett. So I don't know. I don't think we could talk about him anymore, Chris. So now I'm just messing. But let me bring up a new topic here. We talked about grading. Brian, I laugh every time I watch your videos because of the cover up stickers. So could you maybe tell anybody that hasn't watched your channel why you cover up the grades on your cards? And
Absolutely. Every time I show a card, I cover up the grades. And so here's one of my favorite inserts. I love these early 90s Elites cards. 92 Elite is this one. This is a Griffey. And this is in a BGS assigned 9. And I put a sticker on there to cover up the grade because honestly, I don't care. I mean, I care about the card. I feel like so many grading companies, they put the grade on there and the number is so huge. It's distracting. It takes away from me. It takes away from the beauty of the card itself. And so I want to draw attention back to the card itself. And I'm happy to talk about the grade. I'm not shying away from it. I'm not embarrassed by it or whatever. But I just feel like we, as a hobby, are, well, kind of in the words of Mangini, it's like, are we collecting cards anymore? Are we collecting slabs? What is it? You know, and I think it's so silly, you know, to go after the 10s personally. I just don't personally agree with that. I know people do. I know people are big, you know, that's up to them. There's no wrong way to hobby. But yeah, I cover up the sticker because I don't like the fact that when I look at cards, my eye is immediately drawn to the corner to look at the number. I think there's something wrong with that. And so, yeah, I covered up and say, you know, too bad. You have to wait until I tell you what it is.
I'll be honest. My eye does go to the grade first.
Of course it does. That's the whole thing. And that's the problem.
But look, let me give my rebuttal real quick. My eye goes to the grade. I go, okay, it's a 9. And now I look at the card and I concentrate on the card. I don't go back to the 9 and go back. Like, so yes, I agree. You look there first. But in your videos, I'm looking at the white sticker and it's distracting me. It's actually a pretty good gimmick because
but what is that? Okay,
sit there and go, what grade is that?
If the sticker is distracting, what does that say about you? What are you focusing on? I'm showing a card. You're looking at the slab. I'm showing the card. Okay, so that's a you problem. But I understand it though because it's the same thing. It's like I don't like seeing that in myself because, you know, this was one of those cards that was a dream card for me as a kid. I would look at this in shows and then just drool, right? And the fact that I can pick one up now, and not just pick one up in like a 7, I'm very proud of it. That the fact that it's a 9, it's like, wow, I really, you know, went for it. And that was an important card for me to have in a really great condition. It's just that if I saw a 9 sitting there raw and a 10 sitting there raw, I'm not sure I'd be able to tell the difference. You know, sitting there, you know, it doesn't make sense to pay $1,000 for one of those cards and $250 for the other one. Why would you pay 4x for, you know, if you saw them just sit, it's the same card. Why are you paying 4x for this one? The 10 tax. I don't understand it. I mean, I understand it's nice to have a nice big round number at the top of your card. Great. Okay. Well, too bad. There's no number there anymore. Now what?
I honestly think though, because you do 90s cards mainly, like it's either an 8, 9, or 10. So it's not like if you had all vintage and you had that, like it would be even worse for me because I'd be like,
well, right, because you're right. In 90s, mostly it's 8 through 10s, you know, and occasionally 7s, you know. But with the vintage, all of the grades are in play. It could be anything.
Exactly. What do you think about that philosophy, Jason? Being somebody who was on the PSA registry.
It's funny because as soon as grading became a thing, that's the first thing dealers said, right? Are you collecting slabs or are you collecting cards? Yeah. And I think it's the evolution of the hobby to some extent, but you know, we have to be honest with ourselves and say, you know, without grading, buying and selling cards online would be impossible. Yeah. For the most part. It would just create think about how many returns and how many issues you'd have trying to buy cards without grading, right? Online. So I think it's a necessary evil to make the hobby have the ability to at least agree on to some extent that the card is, you know, within a certain range of grade. But other than that, to me, especially when you're talking about collecting, because I have the same card and I think I have an 8, you know, like I didn't care if it was 9 or 10. It's because same reason is like, I know that card, there's 10,000 of them, I think. They're not rare. So I don't really care what the grade is because I know that they're not really that rare of a card for the 90s. So, you know, in fact, I just got one, I think maybe last year. It's like I never even thought I need to go out and get it because I knew there was enough of them to go around that I didn't need to worry about that one card. And that just, to me, it's like as a collector, I'm like trying to get the rare stuff first before it either dries up or disappears. Right. Because I do feel like with 90s cards, there is somewhat of an infinite or kind of finite time period, where some of these cards are going to be locked away. The rubies, the embossed refractors, some of the really rare and limited cards, essential credentials, to where there's not going to be one sold in 2 or 3 years. Like you're going to get one shot every 4 years to get one of these cards. And that's sort of what I was kind of focusing on. But again, you have to also be realistic to know, like, unless you have the financial means, you're not going to be a master set collector anyway. You're not going to have every card. There's always going to be somebody who may be able to outbid you on a rare card. And you have to kind of live with the fact that you have the collection you have. But, going after the rare stuff, that's why I was paying attention to the odds and the rarity back in the day, was I was trying to get the rare cards I could find before they became so expensive. Because I thought Griffey was going to go the way of Jordan. My reason to get in with Griffey was this: the delta between Griffey and Jordan was more than 10x for the rare stuff. And so I thought, well, if Griffey goes up to half of what Jordan is, or a third of what Jordan is, that's a big runway. So let's get in early. Let's get in now before that starts to happen. And it really hasn't gone that far, but Griffey cards have gone up quite a bit in value compared, and have caught up a little bit with Jordan. So my first theory was a little right, but the idea was get in early and try to get some of the rare stuff before it just got too expensive. Now we've kind of hit that delta. Now it's kind of like there are a lot of cards I want to get, but I am priced out on some cards, like the 97 embossed refractor, the gold. I'd have to sell off a significant portion. I'd have to do my 68 3D Clemente deal where I took like a third of my collection and sold it to buy it, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that card has become almost a hobby icon, in terms of just,
We'll talk. A lot of us, obviously, we have a completionist mindset in some ways. Like there's set collectors all over the hobby. There's a lot of people go after the base run of a certain player, and I think like you guys are in kind of the same mindset as me, like, because I'm trying to collect all the Clemente cards, so I kind of know I probably won't ever complete that list, right? So I guess that's kind of my question to you guys is, Clemente, like, to me, like, if I get to 95%, I'd probably be like feel like I finished. Like, as far as like Maddox and Griffey go, like, I'm guessing it's crazy amount of cards there. Like, what would be like a percentage that would be like, wow, I did a great job here? Because like, Brian, your dad was the Bonds guy, and I believe he was one of the biggest in the United States. So I almost wonder, was he at 95%? Was he at 98%? Like, so Brian, if you want to start with like how far in Maddox you feel you could go, and maybe how far your dad was.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think after watching my dad, I mean, I don't know as far as an actual number, because it wasn't even just cards. It was hats and pennants and bobbleheads and posters and coins and you name it. And so I think he puts a number around somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000, but there was way more than that when you just talk about unique pieces.
Wow.
And he was really going after everything. I mean everything. He had everything. He had the essential credentials. He had the Donruss Crusade Reds. He had two of them actually at one point. He had, I mean, you name it. I think he probably had, I don't even know how many 1-of-1s he had. I mean, maybe from the 90s. I mean, he had 98 Topps Gold Label 1-of-1. He had Flair Showcase 1-of-1 with a purple stamp on it, and I mean, he had all the legacies, all of them. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was absolutely absurd. And watching him, and acquire these, I don't think for me and for my collection, I don't have a desire to have a collection that is of that size. I just don't. I don't have the resources for it. Don't have the room for it, the real estate for it. That's not something that interests me. Just to accumulate and get a number. I would instead of just amassing, and hoarding these things, I'd prefer to curate more carefully what kind of pieces I'm adding to my collection. And so I see myself doing some more targeted runs. And so right now I'm working through Greg Maddox refractor runs. And so I'm looking for his Topps Chrome, Topps Finest, Bowman's Best, Bowman Chrome runs from the 90s and up through his playing days as a Brave. So Braves uniforms, so 2003, 2004, depending on the set. That's sort of what I'm working through now, and I'm getting pretty close to completing that. There's only a handful that I'm missing for most of those runs. I will say my current targeted Grail card is the 97 gold embossed refractor for Maddox. That's a sticking point for me. There have been 2, I think, that sold on eBay. The first one about a year ago sold. It was listed for about 1,000, and they took a best offer, but I don't know what it was. And there was another one that sold for about that 900 to 1,000 fairly recently.
So to kind of clear your mind of like being a completionist, maybe you're kind of eating the elephant one bite at a time. You're going, I'm going to go after this checklist, and then you kind of feel like, okay, I got that checklist done. I feel good about myself. You know what I mean?
Well,
Kind of
again,
like
it's too overwhelming if you try to consider. You look at trading card database and see how many there are actually out there.
yeah,
It's just completely overwhelming, and I don't have any desire to chase after. Well, I got to get this checklist from this set, and I got to get this this
Yeah.
parallel, this gold parallel, then I got to get this and that. I'd rather focus my time, my energy, and resources on a much more smaller, manageable chunk, where I can really and especially if it's a run of cards that really is significant and means something to me.
right.
Something else that I really enjoy. I love refractor cards in general, so I'm looking at those. Something else I absolutely love is Dufex. I love all the Dufex cards. So I'm also working through a Maddox Dufex run. And I saw you showed the green artist proof that you had from the new Pinnacle 90. Yeah, exactly. And 2 of the Griffies. Yeah, exactly. I'm looking for the Maddox for that one as well. There's a couple on eBay, but they're kind of listed at buy it nows that are exorbitant to where it's way higher. There they are. Yeah, there's Thomas. There you go. Yes. Yeah, there's the R. Oh, yes, beautiful. Yes. I don't suppose you have the the Maddox in there, but if you do,
I do actually. I have it in a box right next to me. I just bought
Nice.
the PSA 10 that just ran on eBay.
Really? Okay. How
Wow.
about
I mean, it wasn't because I wanted a PSA 10. It's because they're so hard to find.
they are. They're very hard to find.
That's the one that was up for auction. The one dealer had almost like 50, 60 of them. I ran all at once,
Wow.
and I won I think 15 of them.
Jeez.
And
Nice.
the big one I won was the Frank Thomas, and I won the Mariano Rivera, the Frank Thomas, and I believe the Maddox was in there too.
Okay.
So yeah.
So Jason, let me take the same question to you. As far as Griffey and Thomas go, do you have your own checklist? Do you
right here.
what would what was your answer? I'm sorry, I missed it.
So when I first started back with Griffey, I made a very concerted effort that I was going to do 2 things. I was going to collect his refractors and his autos from the 90s. I thought that was realistic. I could do that. There's about 5 Griffey refractors. There's 124 refractors that I've identified in the 90s for Griffey. So I have a checklist of 124 cards. I've got 67 so far of his 124 refractors. So I think that's doable. There's 5 refractors that are number 25 or below. There's one that's out of 5, the Golden Anniversary Rainbow. There's only 5 of those from 98, and the 99 Bowman Chrome Anniversary Gold is out of 25, I believe. So those are obviously the rare ones. So will I get that number to 5 Golden Anniversary from 98? Probably not. So I may have to say my collection will be complete without that card. But I do feel like the other cards are somewhat attainable because in the Griffey collecting world, the refractors, while being important, outside of a few of them, like the Man Refractor and a few other ones, they don't get as much competition. You don't have the completionists out there getting every one of those. So I feel like I might be able to swing that. On the auto side, I haven't done a checklist yet, but I believe there's probably about 25 or 30 Griffey autos from the 90s. Maybe a little bit more. I have to really sit down and look at every set because I keep finding new ones. Like I bought one the other day or this year that was kind of like my big Griffey pickup, and I didn't even realize this one existed. This MVP auto. It's a retail only autograph. And I saw it listed on eBay. I'm like, I didn't know that card existed. On card auto from retail only. Can you imagine buying a retail box and getting of MVP, like the cheapest product made at that time, and getting
Wow.
on card Griffey auto? I like that, and that's the cool thing about the '90s. Like they didn't really, they would never do that today, right? You would never get an on-card Griffey auto out of a cheapest retail product that was out there, right? That was what you could do in the '90s. But that's the idea, is to get the Griffey autos from the '90s and get the refractors, and everything else is sort of like just for fun. Like I love defects as well. I love artist proofs. I think they're super undervalued. I like the fractal matrix cards just because they're weird and oddball. I really want to establish Griffey. That's sort of like my biggest insert card I would love to have from the '90s. But again, I have to get the '97 embossed refractor gold. I mean, that's
Right.
that's on everyone's list. If you go to the '90s, like there's about 5 cards on everyone's list that says these are the big key cards I got to have. I got to have an essential credential. I got to have the ruby. I got to get the I got to get the PMGs. And I got to get the embossed refractors. That that's sort of like the big cards. That's like the heavyweights in the hobby for player collecting. That's what they have. That's the cards they get, and everything else is kind of second tier. If you don't, those are the big ones. Once you get through those, everything else is a lot easier to find and get. And like I have some of the cool Griffey autos. I have the SP Chirography, the one with his hat. He's blowing the bubble, right? Or he's got the hat on backwards, and that card is huge, but it's not a '97 embossed refractor. It's just those autographs are in the $1,000 range. That card is in the $10,000 range, probably more now. So it's a factor of 10 between what that card is worth. My refractors or my autos versus that one card. So it does kind of put in perspective, like that certain cards have gotten so hot, the rubies, essential credentials, the embossed refractors, that is, you're not competing against just Griffey collectors. You're competing against guys putting the whole set together. I sold my one Griffey PMG to the guy who's putting that whole set together, and he paid me an incredible amount of money because it's a Griffey PMG, and and they don't come up for sale very often. But that's I knew, because PMGs weren't part of my my core collection, and I know I could buy a lot of other Griffey cards with that money. That's sometimes what you do. I'm not going to have all those cards. I'm not going to have the base Griffey PMGs. They're just outside of my scope. I just don't think I'll ever be able to get those cards. So I can get the cards I want and complete the checklist I want to have, but it's not going to be every Griffey card. That's just unrealistic. And the guys who have those cards, who are putting together those complete runs, they're awesome. I love watching them, but that's just not something I'll ever be able to do.
Yeah. Well, are you, Jason? You have about 8 more minutes. I never really talked to you about what time you had to go. So are you good?
I'm fine tonight. Tonight is I'm not running against it.
Okay. Let's I think I asked you guys to also bring maybe your 3 favorite 3 favorite '90s inserts. I asked you guys that, correct? Okay.
Yep.
Brian, if you have them ready, you want to go first?
Sure. Now I already showed a couple of them. The Pinnacle White Hot from '95 is just one of mine, because it's the Dufex, and I just love it. It's just fantastic. Just love it. And then I sort of, for myself, I put the refractor sort of out of play, because otherwise I would just show a bunch of refractors. I mentioned this one before too, but Donruss Elites. I like the '92 and the '93s. They had the cracked ice on the borders. Those are gorgeous. And I had a hard time thinking of a third one. And so in general, I'm just going to throw something very '90s out there. And I just like the fact that a lot of these inserts, because we think of the '90s, we think of inserts, we also think of parallels, but the '90s did both. They had parallels of inserts. And so, like you had the Home Run King gold medallions, right? And you had all those. And so you had these other ones where you had something like this, where you had this fantasy team insert that was numbered to 2000, but only the first 250 had the little star die cuts in the side. And so it's serial number on the back, 2000, but this card's number 51 out of 2000, so only the first 250. So only 1/8 of the run had that die cut in the side, and so that makes it pretty cool. They did the same kind of thing for a lot of the Diamond Kings cards, where they were numbered to 5,000, but only the first 500 were on a canvas cardstock. Same kind of thing. And so they had inserts, and they had a sort of a parallel of the insert that was exclusive, like 10 times rarer than the base insert. And so that's just an example of one. It was funny, actually. This is the one of the only cards I've ever purchased on Whatnot, and I bought this with the Whatnot credit from signing up for Greg's midlife cards Whatnot sign up, and so that was the card that I purchased with that money. And I don't think the seller knew that the die cut was a special version of that card, because I got it for $5.
That's the best when research hits, and you just,
right.
That's
so
awesome.
I was very pleased with that card. But that's just in general, just one of those things that you find. There's the studio freeze frame that has the die cut on the top and bottom, and the holes punched in it to look like the film that's there. That's just so cool. Same kind of deal.
Yeah.
So those are my three. Tomorrow it might change. I might have three different ones tomorrow, but I love them. I love them.
I'm trying to flip through my cards. I actually had a similar situation. Oh, here it is. So I have the Daily Juice card as a safe search. The reason why is because they had 100 of them from the Clemente collection.
Right.
So
right.
one day some guy bought a Clemente collection off of somebody, and he listed this as just a Daily Juice card.
No.
Yeah. So I sent him an offer.
Knowledge, man. Knowledge.
I sent him an offer, and I believe it was like $40, and they normally go for like 200. So
that's fantastic. Well played. Well played. There you go. I salute you. Nicely done.
Jason, you ready to go? You want to show us some of your favorites?
Yeah, it's so hard to pin it down to just a few. I mean, I'll start here with, I've already shown this card once, but I really think the Top Stars and Steel holographic embossed from 99 is so cool. It's got so much technology in the card. The back's a refractor, the front's a refractor. It's got a plastic dome on the top of it. That's why it's called domed hollow foil. It's just got so much technology into it. It's metal. The card's made out of metal. It's just, there's so much coolness in that card that and it's just, you don't see them very often, that I really just love that, that whole set. In fact, I'm putting this whole set together. The one thing I am morphing a little bit in my collecting is I'm starting to build 90s insert sets. So this is only 44 cards in this whole set. And so I'm actually putting this whole set together now. I have about 15 of the 44 cards. So to me, it's just like, and and then they also had them in 98. So here's the 98 version of Griffey. And again, the card has straight corners, and it doesn't have the plastic coating. So that it was a more traditional refractor looking card in 98. But in 99, they went crazy and made the card completely different, which I think is really cool. I will show refractors because that's the main part of my collection. I don't have the Griffey in this card, but I have the Frank Thomas. I have the Man refractor. And if you see these cards in person, it's hard to explain just how nice these refractors are. The color depth, how it changes. It almost looks like they're 3D the way they do these refractors. The 90s refractors are just different. They don't look the same. But the Man refractors are some of the nicest looking refractors ever made. And a lot of people say they are the nicest refractors ever made. I had a card, but I realized it's sort of a cheat because the card really isn't 90s, it's 2000. But I really like this set from Ultra. So I'll show it, but it's not really a 2000s, 90s card, but it's the Ultra Talented card from 2000 Ultra. And these are numbered, I believe, got to 99.
Oh my gosh.
And so I have both the Griffey and the Thomas. And I think those are, really, really nice. But if I was going to pick another 90s card, I really like this set. There's two versions of it. There's a refractor version numbered to 24, but the Fleur Brilliance, the gold. And that is the Frank Thomas front numbered out of 99. I have the Griffey. I graded it myself. And the 24 karat, which is like refractory, is really deep and vibrant. So, and again, the established, I just don't have an established. That's kind of my dream card right now as far as just an insert. But those are the cards I really love. And I think if you go through it, on a daily basis, it could change. I like Dufex as well.
I just forgot.
Really,
I like Donruss Crusade. I
love
Crusade
Donruss
Green
Crusade.
Maddox. That's one of my favorites. I just realized that right now. I forgot to pull that one
Yeah,
out. But
I actually am putting together the whole Green Crusade set again. Like I said, with the
big
with
set,
the
100 cards, right?
oh, it's like 200. If you add the high numbers and the rookies, I think it gets up. It's like 150 or something like that.
Yeah, I guess if
It's
you because the call to arms. I mean, well, it
yeah,
depends. I guess they didn't. Well, they released most of them by the time they were done, but there were a couple that were supposedly never released.
they did, and
So,
those cards are insanely hard to get. Just recently, someone did the whole XXX. They call them executive,
oh yes,
versions. I'm a little suspicious about those. I'm just not. I just like when those kind of things come out, I'm just like, is some guy just dropping 10 of those at a time, and he has like 1,000 of them in his basement? Like
right.
I just a little leery of when cards come out 30 something years after the original version, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this has never been seen before. It
Mhm.
could happen, but I would think by now we would have seen almost everything that was behind closed doors by now.
Yeah, I picked up one. I wanted to have one for my collection, so I picked up one of those executive proofs.
Mhm.
So Theo, I don't know if you realize what we're talking about here. So Donruss, when Pinnacle went bankrupt in '98, um, it kind of threw a whole bunch of the sets that were coming out there into chaos. There were a whole bunch of cards that were never released that they got backdoored and somehow left the factory in various
Wow.
states of completion. Some of these cards were intended to be serial numbered and weren't. Others were never officially released at all. And there are a couple sets that have insanely difficult to find cards because they were never officially released. This is a little bit different, and this is not just a promo card or typical proof that says sample across the front or promotional sample or something like that. There's a specific type of proof called an executive proof where the serial number on the back has, if it's out of 5,000, it would say like XXXX out of 5,000. And when you see the X's there, that is a specific type of executive proof that is supposedly way rarer than any other kind of promo. But again, as Jason points out, no one really knows the circumstances of those. No one really knows how many of them are out there, and so yeah, they're tough to find. But we just don't know as a community exactly what the origins of those are. How many people estimate there might be 4 or 5 of each of them that are out there,
Wow.
but we don't really know. I mean, someone could in fact be sitting on hordes of them. We don't know.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
recently picked one up for my Maddox collection because I wanted to have one. I was like, okay, let's go for one. So I'm gonna go for Master Craftsman.
Yeah, I almost bought the Jason Kindle just to have one, but yeah, I forgot about it in the auction. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just Crusades to me are the perfect refractor almost. Like they perfected that technology almost on that card. And I think another one that doesn't get a lot of exposure is the Donruss limited exposures. Some of those look really amazing. The perfect collection cards from Donruss also had some really nice shine to them. So there were some really nice looking refractor type cards. The Donruss
yeah.
limited exposure star power cards supposedly have only a print run of like 30.
Yeah, and again, the collections ones, like you were saying,
Yeah, collection.
they limited them based on what set they were from, right? So the elite ones were numbered. They weren't hand numbered. They were
They were not
numbered,
numbered.
but they were only 550 of those, and then
Right.
when you had the
Donruss
Donruss
preferred was
Preferred,
like
yeah, those were like
63 or something.
55, I think, right?
Yeah,
Is that
55. Okay.
yeah. So they weren't numbered, but good luck finding them.
Yeah, they are rare, and I think the one thing I love about Baseball Cardpedia, they'll say like if they think the print runs are accurate, and that's one of the ones they do find accurate. Unlike what was it like 97, 97 mirror golds, they said like they were all backdoored, and so there's a whole lot more mirror golds in 97 than they were in 96 because of how they print. They also did multiple printings. They
Yeah,
got the
they
mysterious
did.
black,
Yeah,
gold.
they did five printings on that 97 select certified.
Yeah, kind of
Right.
ruined the set. I mean, honestly, they
Yeah.
had something going, and yeah, I mean, obviously they needed money, so they kept reprinting it. But man, that really ruined that whole card set. And it's a nice looking card set, but they,
I love it. Yeah.
Guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on tonight. And I just wanted to say I obviously haven't started collecting any 90s inserts, but I've been really enjoying seeing, a bit of a movement going on right now in our little community. I want to first say, like, Brian kind of came on the scene, kind of put his flag down, said, I'm all about the 90s. I'll talk about vintage. I collect some vintage, but I'm about the 90s. It was really cool to see. And even though it was a topic that I didn't have a knowledge base on, it's still cards, and I still saw Brian's passion. So him, Adam, and Matt from the Card Story started up a little monthly segment. They're doing 90s Corner. I did invite Adam to come on if he wanted to also, but I want to give them a shout out. I've been really enjoying the first episode so far. I think it's been really good, Brian, and I'm really happy to see you in the community now, man. It's really awesome. So
well, thank you for those kind words. I'm really happy to be in the community. It's so much more fun having people to talk with and bounce ideas off of, and comment and things on each other's videos, and it's just wonderful. Last 2 years it's been a very sort of something I did in almost isolation, sort of just alone, just browsing eBay and not having an outlet for communicating with other like-minded collectors and sharing the passion for 90s. And even though I've been watching people's YouTube channels for a long time, there was just such a lack of dedicated sort of 90s content. 80s, 90s, early 2000s just seemed like a dead zone in the hobby when it came to the card community. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to bring the focus back to here and just put it out there, because I know there are people who do collect multiple eras, people that also do enjoy this too. And so I wanted to, I don't know, just come out and say, hey, look, you're not alone. There are dozens of us out there that like 90s cards. Hey, and it was such a cool time in the hobby. It was the innovation era. Every year there was something brand new happening with cards and the technology. And now there's die cut cards, now there's acetate cards, now there's gold foil, now there's holofoil, and now there's refractors, and now there's wooden cards, and now there's all this stuff. There's a peel on this card. We have to peel it now, or do we? Right? And so all these weird issues that come up with these 90s cards, because the hobby was experiencing such a fast rate of growth, but with that comes growing pains. And so we end up with hulking refractors, and we end up with these unforeseen consequences, backdoored cards, and I mean, who knows? So
it'll be interesting to see how the National shakes out, because last year there was hardly any 90s cards at the National. I found a few dealers, and I got my mirror red Griffey at the National, right? But it was like the dealers all recognized it. They were like, you're like the 40th person that's come up to ask me about 90s cards. And I'm hoping that this year the National, there's going to be some dedicated dealers just dealing in 90s cards, because to me, I think it's someone could clean up and make a lot of money by bringing some really cool 90s cards to the National, because it is such a vintage show. But then you get vintage and modern, and then all of a sudden 80s and 90s cards are just kind of left to the wayside. But there's tons of high-end 90s cards that someone could bring to that show and make a killing. Because just think about 97 embossed refractors. Like, how many collectors are out there needing them for their sets, right? If some guy showed up with like 50
both of us.
Yeah, both of us, exactly. Like, they would sell every one of them, right? They would probably leave that show selling every one of those cards. So it's just interesting to see if the National, the dealers are starting to pick up on this trend of 90s cards really becoming strong, not just basketball. Because there's tons of 90s basketball at the National. There's no baseball and very little football. And I think that is where I would like to see, hopefully, some more focus in the National, because those dealers would do great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I went to the Philly show this spring, and it was the first card show I've been to in 20 years. And so I had no idea what to expect. None. And so I went there, and it seemed like everything was either ultra modern or it was vintage, and there was no in between.
Mm-hmm.
And there were very few tables where occasionally you'd find a value box that had some 90s inserts. But and the very few 90s inserts that you would see that was in any kind of a showcase would either be just astronomical prices. There was the Barry Bonds Crusade Red that was in one of the I saw there they had a $15,000 price tag on it, and I saw a handful there was a couple of Maddox inserts. They were numbered out of 100 that they had, I think, a $300 price tag on. And that just seemed a little bit high to me for what they were and the condition that they were in. So I passed on those.
I do think it's interesting because just from my thought process, and this is, I know I heard Jason kind of complaining about that point last year at the National, but from my thought point is the biggest vintage collections come out when somebody either retires or they pass away, right? And the biggest 90s insert collectors, I would say, are in the 35 to 50 age group, right? So
that's a really fascinating point. They're all locked away.
Yeah. Right. So like there's not collections getting, like your dad is kind of like an anomaly, like that he was collecting 90s cards. Most guys his age would have been collecting vintage at that time. You know what I mean? So we're not seeing these big groupings being pushed out. You know what I mean? That's just off the top of my head. I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That's a fascinating point.
It does show too that I think that 90s collectors are so collectors for the most part because the prices have risen to the point where if you're going to flip, you would have done it by now, right? If you just had these cards as kind of like, I just collected them, but they don't mean a lot to me. The prices have gone astronomical for some of these sets. You would have sold, if you knew, if you were following anything or knew about pricing. So I feel like what people are keeping, and if you go to the Griffey, chat boards, it's like those guys aren't selling. And if they sell, it's because they have doubles or whatever, but they're not selling their collection. If one of them sells, they sell to each other. It never even hits the open market, right? It never even hits like a dealer's table because they're selling to each other. There's such a big, voracious appetite for these cards already that there's no need to really even bring it to an eBay. And if it does go to an eBay, like some of these dealers like TNT North, they kind of specialize in some of the 90s stuff. Like they'll save up and do a big 90s run, but it'll happen like once every 2 or 3 months. It's not, you don't see these cards coming out all the time. I'm just wondering if there is going to be a dealer one of these days that just specializes in this and just starts buying these collections, curating eBay, curating ComC, and just like, I'm a 90s dealer and I have all these cool cards. And if you need it, you got to come to me, right? I mean, I think it's such an opportunity. I don't have the money to do it, or I would have probably tried to do it a long time ago.
They would clean up. If there had been a dedicated 90s table at this Philly show, and with the size of what that show was, they would have had no competition. Yeah. If you wanted something high-end 90s or mid-end or something rare or hard to find from the 90s, you would have nowhere else to go but this table.
Well, last year the National, there was a dealer that had a bunch of. The dealer bought a bunch of the Pinnacle auction cards.
Oh, okay.
And she had, I think, 5 Pulsar sets. And she pieced out 4 of them individually. She wouldn't sell the 5th one individually, so I bought the entire set to get my Griffey. Jeez. To get my Pulsar Griffey. But I have the full set, the Maddox, every card in that set. And it's a beautiful set. But again, that she bought I think she won a bunch of lots in the Pinnacle bankruptcy sale. And she had just weird stuff. Like it made no sense. But then all of a sudden she's like, I had 4 or 5 sets of Pulsars.
Wow.
That she got in the bankruptcy auction. And it's just stuff like that. And then they're gone, right?
Yeah.
She sold every one of them at the show. They're all gone. And it's just, that's the kind of stuff about the 90s that makes it so fun. But again, if a dealer really had a table full of those kind of cards, I think it would just be a field day. They would not leave that show without making a lot of money because people would just have a huge appetite for those kind of cards.
Yeah.
And you can see on eBay, like you'll see a card show up and like, I think there's a 97 embossed Frank Thomas on right now, gold.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the watch count.
Yeah.
The watch count's already ridiculous.
Yep.
It's just, like that card hit, it's going to hit big. It's going to go for probably the biggest price that one of those cards have sold for because one hasn't sold in forever. No. It's just, you mentioned like Max, there's been 2 of them. There was a Griffey out there for a while and someone had to buy it now and there hasn't been one on since like 2 years. It's just, that's the thing that I love about the 90s is like, they are truly, some of these cards are truly rare. They're not, this isn't a made up scarcity. This isn't like 85 versions of the same card, all numbered differently. This is
Mhm.
literally cards that, and some cards like the established, they only made 1 year of them. There's
Yeah.
there's no second year established. There's only 1 year you can get that card, and that's pulsars. There's only 1 year you can get a pulsar. That's what makes those cards kind of cool, and I think the bankruptcy does add to the mystique, right? There's mysterious, print runs. There's cards that were never released. There's stuff that comes out in the 90s. It makes the whole era kind of a mystery about what's really out there. And like those executive cards just showed up one day. It's like, oh, look at all these.
It's a deep rabbit hole to go down, and it's funny because not even Baseball Cardpedia really has the whole story.
No,
It's just kind of what we know that people have gathered from anecdotes, what's been published, what you're reading between the lines. We're all kind of flying semi-blind here.
it makes it a lot of fun though. It does make the whole experience, and it's a community based too. Like if you go on the message boards, that's what they talk about.
Mhm.
How rare is this card? Where is this real? Is this card really rare? Is it like what's the odds? And how many do you have? And how many's out there? It's like it's a great community, and it's very similar to vintage cards. Like that's why I say pre-war is like that. Pre-war is like, does this card exist? Is this a real card? Is this someone made this card up? That happens a lot in pre-war, right? It's like something pops up and like, I've never seen that card before. Is that real? Is that an actual card that, or does someone make it in their backyard? That happens in the 90s all the time too. Like did someone just like you see them on the emboss, like those where they peel the backs off of them and say these are like promo, or I forget what they call them, but they've just peeled the back off a card and they call them some sort of like
Test proof, something.
yeah, like proof or something.
Right.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, so I think I honestly could talk for like another hour with you guys. It's been really a fun conversation, but I think we'll end it here just so we keep it under 2 hours. Maybe somebody will rewatch this, but either way, I had a great time. I want to give a shout out to Jason though. Jason was like the perfect person to add to this with Brian. You're like the OG of like being on here talking about 90s cards. And it's cool to get both of you guys together, being somebody newer to YouTube and somebody who's been on YouTube for a while. But Jason's got an awesome channel. I think you should check out both their channels. Though they both go into deep dives a lot of times on different topics, which I love. So check out both their channels. But thank you, Jason, for coming in here today. It was awesome, man.
Well, hey, if you want to check out my channel, I'm opening every wax block from the 90s. I've got 72 I've done. I only need 360 to go.
That's some big goals there. I love it. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. We had over 30 people in here consistently for the whole 2 hours. Thank you guys. The chat was awesome. Some great people in there. Thank you guys for watching. And once again, we're going to have Hobby Palooza coming up on this channel. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. It's in 2 weeks. We got a heck of a lineup coming up for Hobby Palooza. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you to Brian and Jason for coming in here. I'll see you guys in the next one.